This PowerPoint is for OCR Cambridge Technical Unit 2. It's a revision PowerPoint in preparation for the Unit 2 exam. The first slide we're going to look at is values of care, but we're focusing on the adults' values of care. It's about ensuring that staff deliver the values of care, ensures that service users have equal opportunities and are free from discrimination. Now, there are three values of care that you need to be aware of, but you also need to be aware of how a service provider can show those values of care. So it's not good enough just to know the three, which are promoting equality and diversity, promoting individuals' rights and beliefs, and maintaining confidentiality. You've got to be able to give an example of how they do it. So to promote equality and diversity, you need to be able to use non-discriminatory language, challenge discrimination, care should meet the individual's needs. For promoting individual rights and beliefs, there needs to be things like an access to a prayer room. You need to be able to provide food that meets people's religious needs, such as kosher, or cultural needs, such as vegan. Maintaining confidentiality, so there should be no gossiping about the people that you are working with. Any documents that you have on the service users you're working with should be filed safely away. Anything got on a computer screen should be password protected, and any information you have should be on a need-to-know basis. So it should only be passed on to those people that have the right to know. We now move on to the values of care in childcare services. It really is important to revise this. They do like putting this exam question in. So the values of care in childcare services, it all revolves around the children. So making the welfare of the child paramount, keeping the children safe and maintaining a healthy environment, working in partnership with parents, guardians and families, encouraging children's learning and development, valuing diversity, ensuring equality of opportunity, anti-discriminatory practice, maintaining confidentiality and working with other professionals. Now, this is in the latest exam in January 2024, and it's not to say it won't turn up again, but it's really worth making sure that you know examples of how, for example, you can make the welfare of the child paramount, how you can keep children safe and maintain a healthy environment. So that when it comes to the exam and they say give an example of making the welfare of the child paramount, you can go, oh, well, the settings such as the nursery could ensure they've got a safeguarding policy in place, that any of the children that they work with, their needs come first. So you must have an example for each of these, and it's really worth making sure you revise this section thoroughly. So going back to the values of care and confidentiality in particular, there is something called a need-to-know basis. Information should always be shared on a need-to-know basis only. So you don't just share it with anyone willy-nilly. You make sure that you are only sharing it with people that have the permission to the other workers that are working with that particular individual that need to know. That also includes not sharing information with the person's family or friends without that actual service user's permission. For the exam, you need to make sure you know different forms of discrimination, direct and indirect. I think it was a summer of 23. There was a question which quite a lot of students got wrong on being able to give an example for direct and indirect discrimination. So direct discrimination is intentionally putting someone at a disadvantage or treating them unfairly based on their differences. And indirect is a policy or practice that applies to everybody, but has a detrimental effect on only some people. So the example they give here is a male applicant must be clean shaven. Well, for those people that can't be clean shaven for their religion, this is indirectly discriminating against them. So for prejudice, there's a negative attitude towards or an unfair dislike of an individual. Then you have labelling, which is identifying people negatively as part of a group, so like all travellers are thieves. Stereotyping, making judgments about groups of people based on prejudice, so it's an unfair assumption that all characteristics are the same. For example, girls are better behaved than boys, boys are better at maths than girls. So it's making sure you're aware of these 5 different forms of discrimination, really. So in past papers, there have been questions on how staff members in a health and social care setting can challenge discrimination. So here are some of the key points. So you can challenge at the time, explain to the person you've just seen discriminating how they're discriminating, and the impact that it could have on that particular person. If it's quite confrontational, you could perhaps challenge afterwards through procedures. You could ask the person to read what the health and social care setting has in place for policies on discrimination, and perhaps alert them to the fact that they are not following these policies. And then you could also, there's another way of challenging discrimination. It's a long-term campaign, and it's challenging afterwards through long-term campaigns. So making sure that if you're the employer and you work in a health and social care setting, that you provide staff awareness training so that staff are aware of discrimination and also be aware of how they may be discriminating against the people that they are caring for. So this PowerPoint slide is really important because this question comes up time and time again. It looks at the impact of discrimination on a service user. And there's lots of impacts that it could have on a service user. So number one, it can disempower them, make them feel that they have no choice or decision in their care. It can affect their self-esteem and self-confidence, lowering it. It can make them have poor health and well-being if they feel that they're not getting the treatment they deserve. They could end up getting physical injuries, bruising, cuts. They might have unfair treatment. It could affect their mental health, depression, anxiety, and that could lead to eating disorders and self-harming. A question on the Equality and Human Rights Commission was in the January 2024 paper, and lots of students found this very difficult, and because mainly it's in a revision guide, but it's not in the actual student textbook. So it's really important you pay attention to this. The EHRC is the Equality and Human Rights Commission, and its aim really is to challenge discrimination. You need to know what it does. So first of all, it has a website that provides information, advice and guidance about discrimination, but within that it provides definition of different types of discrimination. It provides advice on how you can decide what happened, so that whether the discrimination was against equality law. It suggests ways to sort out the situation. It advises on how to make a discrimination complaint. It provides information on how to take a case to court. Lots of students wrote that it was they could provide an advocate. That's not true. They aren't there to provide an advocate. Make sure you don't put that down. So we now move on to NICE, which is the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence. So their main role is to assess new drugs that come from drug producers they may have for treatments for particular illnesses and diseases. So it looks at the new drugs, considers whether it's actually going to benefit people. Will it help the NHS meet its targets? Is it a good, for example, cancer drug? Is it good value for money? And should it be available on the NHS? It also provides national guidance and advice to improve health and social care. It provides evidence-based guidance on how a particular condition should be treated. So if you look at it, it's the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence. So they're almost like the expert on drugs, on how you should care and treat particular conditions. Now I'm going to move on to the CQC, which is the Care Quality Commission. It registers and licenses care services to ensure essential standards of quality and care are being met. So it's like the Ofsted for hospitals, doctors, surgeries and care homes. So it carries out inspections of health and social care settings, monitors them, and checks whether they meet the standards required, and then it will publish a report and it will give a rating, a bit like a score. So it will say outstanding to inadequate. And then it will issue warning notices if they believe that the setting is not meeting the standards, and also fines. They do not train staff. They do not provide training. That's really important to mention here. So even if you don't do particularly very well on your inspection, they don't offer training. So please don't put that in your answers. In past papers, there have been some questions on the benefits and disadvantages of inspections, whether that be a Ofsted inspection or a CQC inspection. So you'll need to sort of know the purposes, and that's to make sure that high quality of care is provided and that standards are being met. But you also need to know the benefits of inspection. So it helps ensure that settings are providing a safe and effective and compassionate and high quality care. It also helps prevent any poor care. It can close down or find settings where there is inadequate care, so that can stop. However, the disadvantages of an inspection is that it can make many staff very stressed, and they might actually not see a true reflection of the healthcare setting. It may be quite fake because once they're in, everyone puts on a pretense, and it's an inspection. It's like they're going in there to say, this is what you've done well, but this is what you need to improve, and there's not really much support in that process. So Ofsted, is similar to the CQC, but it's focused on childcare. So anything in relation to a child, like a school, nursery, a play school, a childminder, will all be Ofsted inspected. So the things that they look for an Ofsted inspection are how good the leadership and management are of that setting, the quality of teaching, learning and assessment going on in a setting, personal development, behaviour and welfare. Are the children being looked after that perhaps come from care homes? Are they safe within that environment? Outcomes, so what are they doing, what they're coming into the school with, and what they leave them to school with in qualification and qualification wise, and also are they safe in that setting? How good is the safeguarding? So again, here's another example of the benefits and disadvantages of an inspection. So some schools, absolutely, when they do really well with an Ofsted inspection, they've got it banners outside their school, outstanding school. So it can be a great motivator. It can be a great way to promote your school, to increase the amount of students wanting to come to school. It can actually help identify areas that schools need to improve on so that they can put more attention to that. It can make parents make an informed choice, like, oh gosh, I think I really want to send that child to a Ofsted outstanding rather than an Ofsted good school. But the disadvantages are very similar to the CQC. It puts a lot of pressure on staff. In schools, it puts lots of pressure on the school leaders as well. And in the media recently, there has been a head teacher that has killed herself because her school did not perform to the standard that she believed that they could, and that was quite heartbreaking that an Ofsted inspection could do that to one person. Bad Ofsted reports could have a domino effect, which makes school improvement much harder. The head teacher could lose their job. Head teachers of schools that are deprived and challenging communities feel that it's very much against them, because those schools that are in those disadvantaged areas tend not to do as well as schools in more affluent areas. So we now move on to the Care Certificate 2014, which provides a framework to ensure that all support workers, like healthcare assistants, have the same introductory skills, knowledge and behaviours to provide compassionate, safe and high quality care. So it covers 15 key areas, and it's to help ensure that there's consistency across the healthcare. So as you can see, there are 15 standards. So first of all, be understanding your role, how you can improve your personal development, your actual duty of care, equality and diversity, fluids and nutrition, safeguarding adults, safeguarding children, basic life support, health and safety, handling information. So these are the key aspects of the Care Certificate. It really is worth paying attention to these, as we've not had a Care Certificate question in a while. Now move on to what is an advocate. This is a question that's quite often included in the exam paper. It's knowing that an advocate is someone that will be able to communicate on your behalf, someone that can almost stand up for you, express your wishes and needs, and they've got to listen to your views and concerns, help you explore your options, provide information to help you make informed decisions, help you contact relevant people, but they do not give you their personal opinion. It's your opinion. The person they're advocating for is opinion that they are then speaking on behalf of. They help to solve, they're not there to help solve problems and make decisions for you. That ultimately is down to the service user, and they're not there to make judgments against you. So they are there just to express your needs and views when you are unable to do this. So examples of organisations that provide advocacy are CAP, Mind and Empower Me. Again, these are usually 1-mark questions, so it's good to keep those in mind and know who is there to provide advocacy. It's good to be aware of the different support groups that are available out there. The three main ones I suggest that you make yourself aware of is Mind, Age UK and Headway. So Mind, a charity that provides advice and support to empower those experiencing mental health problems. Age UK, as you expect, is for people in later adulthood, raise awareness of the situations that face lots of older people. And Headway is a support group for people with brain injuries. It helps provide information, support and services. We're going to start moving on to the acts now, which I know lots of you absolutely love. And we move straight to the Human Rights Act. So anything in a scenario that involves the word right, so right to life, right to respect, right to personal liberty, will usually have something to do with the Human Rights Act. So the key aspects from the Human Rights Act are below. Try to remember these, because if there's a question about that, you'll probably need to remember at least three. So right to life, right to private and family life, right to personal liberty, right not to be tortured, right to a fair trial, your right to freedom of religion and belief. So just quickly going on here from a right to life, this is that we all have the right to live, and that no human or animal should take that away. And if there is a death, it must be investigated. So we all have a right to life, absolutely everybody, and nobody has a right to take that away. So we now move on to the Care Act, which is the main points I would get you to revise here is a duty on local authorities to promote an individual's well-being, for example, personal dignity, protection from abuse and neglect, continuity of care. So if one person moves from, say, for example, Surrey to West Sussex, that their care carries on. So there is no gap, that they just move from one county to the other and their care is continued in that new county. Duty of local authorities to carry out a child's needs assessment. This really is for people that are likely to need care over the age of 18. An independent advocate to be available, so to facilitate the involvement of an adult or carer who is the subject of an assessment. Adult safeguarding. So this includes responsibilities for inquiries into cases of abuse and neglect, and local authorities have to guarantee preventative services. So this is to help prevent the delay of care and support needs being provided. Moving on to the Health and Social Care Act, the main one we have here is no decision about me without me. So it's intended to be a guiding principle behind the treatment of patients. So you should have a choice. Patients will be able to choose a GP, a consultant, treatment, hospital, and it helps to be able to give a choice to these individuals, because it means that they'll actually be consulted about the care that they're receiving. Then we have clinical commissioning groups, which are GP-led bodies. They will commission most health services, including primary care services. There are health and wellbeing boards. They bring together health and social care commissioners and counsellors to encourage joint working on inequalities in health. Then we have public health. So this is improving the health of the population. For example, the main points of public health at the moment in this country is mental health is a huge issue, obesity, vaping, these 10, with vaccinations as well, because that's dropped. They're the types of public health that they may be looking at. And then we have Health Watch, which is an independent service created by the Act, which aims to protect the interests of all those who use health and social care services. I spent a bit of time on this on the slide before, so an impact of no decision about me without me. So it's there to empower people. It includes whether they carry on with their current treatment or not to have treatment. That could be someone that's got a cancer patient and they might weigh up whether it's worth them carrying on with that treatment or not, or just living up the rest of their life the best they can. And informed choices which can result in better outcomes. If people are not involved in decision making, it can make them feel very out of control and disempowered. So we move on to the Equality Act, and what they'll be expecting you to know is mainly about the protected characteristics of the Equality Act. So there are 9 of them. Please make sure you revise this. So it's age, disability, gender reassignment, marriage, race, religion, sex and sexual orientation. With the Equality Act, it prohibits discrimination in education, employment and access to goods. Reasonable adjustments should be made in a workplace if somebody has a disability. And there is a right to breastfeed in public places, but don't get that mixed up with the Human Rights Act, because again, it says rights, and I did say anything of rights would go with the Human Rights Act. So yeah, don't get confused on that one. So we move on to the Mental Capacity Act, 2005, and these are the key points you need to try to remember. So anything to do about decision making and the supporting of decisions usually has to do with the Mental Capacity Act. So the first one is a presumption of capacity. So every adult really has the right to make their own decisions and must be assumed to have capacity to do so unless it's proven otherwise. If they have a document to say, hang on, this person has lost their mental capacity, then a decision can be made from them. Otherwise, you will involve that person in their care. You can have support to make own decisions. So a person must be given all the practical help before anyone treats them, so they can make their own decisions. Unwise decisions, just because an individual makes what seems to be an unwise decision, they should not be treated as in lacking capacity. We have best interests. So this one here is care workers should provide reasons showing the decision they're making under the best interests of the person they're representing. And then there's the less restrictive option. Anything done on behalf of a person who lacks capacity should be at least restrictive of their basic rights and freedoms. So I want to cast your mind back to the film, The Children Act 2004. If you haven't seen it, make sure you see it, because it will help you with your legislation on this one. So the main purpose of this act is to protect children at risk of harm. Now, we had a young boy in the story who's Jehovah's Witness, 17 going on 18, and had he not have had his blood transfusion, he would have died. So there was the dilemma there about, as he was close to 18, what do you do? But ultimately, the Children's Act is to protect children at risk of harm. And then we have the paramountcy principle. So this is about putting children's needs first all the time, making sure that they're at the centre of any care or decisions made. The child has a right to be consulted. So it gives children who are mature enough a voice, as we saw in the Children Act. Children have a right to an advocate, so that's really important. So they have someone that's able to speak on their behalf. Encourages partnership working. So practitioners need to ensure that information is shared to help avoid miscommunications. That's been really important on some of the child abuse cases. And they created the Children's Commissioner. So it's set up local safeguarding children boards to represent children's interests. So this is a Children and Families Act. So this is when it goes wider than the actual child itself and starts incorporating the family. It starts looking at, it includes looking at reforms for adoption, special educational needs, children in care. It's got the role of the Children's Commissioner, so they have stronger powers to focus on the rights of children. So parents with a new child get parental leave, both parents to get time off. So it's looking more about the parents as well in this one, not just the child. It looks at family courts and justice. So if parents are going for a divorce, putting a child first in that divorce, but trying to make sure both parents are involved in that care if possible. It looks at SEND students, looking at ACHPs and how children's needs are assessed. Anything in the exam that's talking about information, data, documents will usually be involved around the Data Protection Act. So with the Data Protection Act, data should be processed fairly and lawfully, used for purposes for which it was intended, should be relevant but not excessive, kept up to date, kept no longer than necessary, should be secured. And this one here is quite an unusual one. It's data should not be transferred to other countries outside the EU. So it shouldn't be sent to places like the United States of America. Now we have the general data protection regulations. It's European legislation, so this may well change, obviously, because the UK are out of Europe. And its whole idea is to increase safety measures and security measures to prevent people from accessing information online or data leaks. And it has 7 principles of data protection, so lawfulness, fairness, purpose, limitation, data minimization, accuracy, for example. So I've been talking all about all the different types of legislation, and I'm now going to move on to a system of redress. I apologise. So where legislation outlines the rights that individuals are entitled to, if those rights are breached, then the system of redress can come into place. It can help an individual have their rights restored. So it means that the setting can be taken to court, and if they're found that they've broken the law, they can be fined. And basically, a system of redress is putting things right. So if you've had something done wrong to you, you can make it right, which is a system of redress. I'm going to move on to a policy. In short, it's a document that sets out what needs to be done and why, and how the organisation seeks to approach specific areas. Some exam questions in the past have asked about what is the benefits of policies. So it helps management and employees understand the business and how it operates. It's a list of guidance and guidelines for making decisions and solving problems. It details of policy help employees to do their job effectively because they should be following it. They should also contribute to a happy workforce, as all staff will know their entitlements. It can help provide quality of care because people should be following it. It ensures people are working within the law, because if they're following of it, it will be within the law, hopefully, and ensures consistency in care. So if the setting staff are following this guidance, it ensures that they're all following it consistently. A question that they enjoy putting into the exam paper is, how would you promote diversity in a health and social care setting? So we've had schools, we've had care homes, and you've got to say different ways that you could do that as a member of staff. For example, you could have displays on different cultures or religions. There could be different choices of food available. So for people that have halal, vegetarians, you could celebrate festivals, that Christmas, Eid, Hanukkah. You could have assemblies, talks, lessons on different cultures and religions. There could be posters in different languages, so you could have all the different languages saying welcome. You could have dress-up days of a particular culture or a particular religion. Those are different ways that you could promote it within a care setting. So we now move on to what do you do if there's a concern in the health and social care setting you're working at. What can you do? So number one, you could speak to your manager or supervisor. You could sort of say to them, this is what I've seen, this is what's happened, and speak to them, because they are in a position of more power than you, and they might know how to tackle it. You could complete a complaints form. If you've got a service user that is unhappy, they could complete a complaints form. You could follow the complaints procedures and policies. If it's very serious and not being listened to, you could whistleblow. You could use PALS if you are a service user. And you could contact CQC and Ofsted. Whistleblowing. So what is whistleblowing? It's the act of reporting concerns or suspicions about potential harm, abuse, neglect, and other forms of misconduct from people that are receiving care or support. Now, every setting should have a whistleblowing policy, and you're protected under law. However, it can mean, if you're found out to be a whistleblower, that staff and management turn against you. You may lose their trust. So there are consequences of whistleblowing. But if you are doing it for the right reason and you see people at harm that are being abused, then whistleblowing is the correct way forward. So what if there is a complaint about the care being provided in a care home? What can the management actually do about it? So if you've had a complaint about a member of staff that may well have called a service user a particular name, what can be done about it? So these are the three main ways that you can tackle it. This constantly appears in exam papers, every other paper. You have to say a way in which staff can be supported. So they could be given training. The training could then ensure consistency in a setting and help raise the standards. If it's a new member of staff, or, for example, they've had a few complaints about them, they could be mentored. So an experienced member of staff could work with them, share their knowledge. Like I say, it's usually a less experienced member of staff, but depending on what's happened. And then there could be monitoring by management, and they could check the progress or quality of a member of staff's work. They can record it. they could speak to them about it. So these are 3 really important points to remember for your exam. Dealing with conflict that you may come across. Now, that may either be with a patient or a family member of that patient having really angry, really upset about something that's happened to their family member. At all points, you've got to try and stay calm. You've got to try and use active listening, which means that you're not talking over them, you're listening to what they say, but you're acknowledging it. So nodding your head or smiling or or looking concerned. So showing with your facial features that you are listening, and then you're showing empathy. So you're understanding what they're saying, but you've got to listen to both sides of the story. For example, if there are 2 people involved in it. Try to communicate clearly, try not to interrupt them, and stay respectful and friendly at all times. I'm going to move on to one last slide that I think I should just remind you of, because it does turn up and it has been in a few past papers. It's about job interviews and staff selection in job interviews and how they should ideally run. So the Equality Act impacts on how staff should be selected and interviewed. For example, the advertisements of jobs should not discriminate against any of the 9 characteristics. So that's linked to the Equality Act. Questions at an interview must be non-discriminatory. So not when are you thinking of having a child? Do you have any children? Are you married? How old are you? They should never be asked, are you gay, are you straight? Interviewers should be trained in equality and diversity so that they're aware of discriminatory practice. And if possible, and I know it's not always possible because sometimes you may go into an interview and there may only be one person interviewing you, but if there's a panel, really there should be a mixed interview panel of different ages, experience, male, females, different ethnicities, and this can actually help avoid bias happening in a job interview or staff selection. Well, good luck in your exam.